Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Preacher. Fuck that up. Another great episode of Preacher, and a lot of stuff went down this episode. Let's break everything down bit by bit. Obviously, this episode did a very interesting thing where we got to see a more, I guess, arguably human side to the cowboy. I mean, granted, we saw his whole situation of going how long it took. Like, obviously, there was a week before the Grail found him, then another week before he decided to work with him, which is like, obviously, it seems like they've got their own ambitions. Like, it seems like everything was to put Jesse in position to be like, oh yeah, you need our help, essentially. That whole thing, which, I mean, it worked out in the end. But obviously, I'll get into that in a little bit. But we saw bits of his memories, aside from the one particular memory we know so well for him. It seemed like his wife was like, basically his wife saw the goodness in him, and it's like, that's how you get into heaven, is kind of feeding that good part of your soul. So it seems like he got baptized, him in a little picnic moment with him, his wife, and his daughter. He had promised to give up drinking as well as killing. And it seems like everything that went down, obviously when his wife and daughter died, everything that went down afterwards when he went back to that town and killed everyone, that's the first time he spilt blood subsequently. And it seems like it's a combination of, it adds even more context to the reason why he went back, because his wife talked about the goodness in his heart, and seeing that little boy, and at that bar you saw the little boy being forced to watch as someone did terrible things to his mom. So it's a combination of trying to feed that goodness in him, trying to do the right thing, I mean, because think about it, when he actually went there, he might have knocked some people out, but he never actually killed anyone. And now in retrospect, it's like, oh, it makes sense. And why he ended up snapping and just doing it anyway at the very end when he came back was simply because the people that he was because in his mind at that time, he didn't care about getting into heaven. He just wanted revenge because they prevented him from getting back to his wife and daughter in time, and he could have saved them, and now they're gone, and it's like, there's no point in saving my soul. That's actually something he kind of comments on when him and Jesse meet each other. Is the fact is, the matter is, there is too late for someone. There is no, trying to save someone, at this point. And it kind of, it was just kind of interesting, seeing that different perspective for him and kind of getting that extra, layer of things of kind of understanding why he went back, Yes, maybe because when he saw that boy, it made him think of his own wife and daughter, but more so than anything, he just wanted to be good, feed that goodness inside of his soul, and feeding that goodness inside of his soul kind of, in basic terms, because he went back and was concerned, it basically led to a series of circumstances that led to him not being able to get back to his wife and daughter. So, but what's kind of interesting is how everything transpired, because you see Tulip still afraid, but it did stop her from don't you go near him, and hits the cowboy. He knocks her out. But that whole scuffle was so good. I love the fact is that you have Jesse. And I mean, for one, Jesse and Cass having that whole conversation about baby foreskin again. About, Jesse's like, well, I mean, as long as it tastes good. But he's like, come on, they're putting baby foreskin in it. It's like, we're back in this conversation again. Is this your go-to conversation piece, Cass? Also love the fact is that Cassie was all like, yo, because him and Tulip had the conversation about who's in charge. And Cass was like, what do you mean? Wait, third in charge? What are you talking about? I always thought I was the one in charge. She's like, really? You're more like third in charge. He's like, third? It's like, in what world do you think you're in charge, Cassie? What are you talking about, dude? I love it. But during that whole thing, you have Jesse kind of just about ready to smoke, and you see Cassidy just fly down the hallway, and making that sound. It's so good. And I love during the fight, he gets pushed into a bookshelf and stuck inside the wall inside that bookshelf. But it's pretty awesome seeing and it seems like Genesis is on the fritz because he tries using it, but it doesn't work. And Jesse's like, what the hell? I brought it up last episode. It seems like Genesis is on the fritz for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe it's because he was close to isn't it Humperdoodle? The Jesus' great 25th grandson, or whatever the case may be, 25th generation grandson, whatever the case may be. But I think being near him, maybe that affected. Like, I'm curious to find out, because it seems like Genesis is on the fritz. Maybe, like I said, maybe there's something to this whole, like, because his soul's inside the cowboy, maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it just doesn't align with Jesse anymore. Maybe Jesse's ambitions and reasoning and stuff like that is no longer aligned with Genesis. Maybe in the end we'll find out that Genesis is like, I went along with you because this was fun, and now I'm not having fun anymore. You're taking this a little too serious, and I'm getting bored, and now I'm not letting you use my powers anymore. Maybe it's going to get to the point Genesis decides, I'm not going to stick around you anymore. Maybe there's something else to it, but you can definitely tell, because the way he was acting, like, I was like, so is a cowboy, like, did he cut off his ears or something like that? But it's like, no, because you could hear it too. There's almost like a distortion when he was using it. Like, obviously, when he's using Genesis, there's a distortion, but even more, like, almost like Genesis was muffled a bit. So, like I said, it popped out at the end of last episode because he had to tell that guy over and over again, just let me pass through. And so you see it this episode too. So, but seeing them go hand in hand with the cowboy, you got, like, can't forget, like, how much of a badass that both Jesse and Tulip was. Tulip going head to head with him, even though she was terrified of him. And I guess arguably you could say that this is her confronting her fear by her dealing with it like this. So I'm curious whether she'll have nightmares going forward anymore. I mean, he's still an unstoppable supernatural killing machine, but still, they put up a good fight against him. Sadly, it wasn't enough. I mean, fortunately for them, he doesn't have his weapons. I'm actually surprised Featherstone didn't go back and get his weapons. I mean, the point was never to kill Jesse. It was to put him in a position, to make Jesse go like, okay, like, he needs their help. It's to put Jesse further in their corner was the whole plan anyway. So I'm sure they were fine with getting rid of his weapons, though. I am curious. I think they're going to find a way back around to somebody. I don't know. They're either going to wind back in the Cowboy's hand or whatever. But, because it seems like no one can use them but him. Because I was about to say, like, what if someone else gets this? Like, but no one can use them. Because Tulip tried to shoot them last episode. No go, so. Well, what's really interesting is the fact is that the lady from hell, the warden from hell, pops up and is like, William, it's time to go. And he's like, basically like, no, not till I'm done with this. And she's like, there's an empty spot in hell. I could fill that with your wife or your daughter. He's like, you can't do that. She's like, God's missing. I can do whatever I want. So there's no one here to stop me. So, and he's basically like, well, preacher, we'll meet again next time. So this story with the cowboy is far from done. I mean, it's not like he's dead. He's back in hell, but got out once. I mean, granted, that was angels, which makes the argument of how did angels find that workaround? You would have thought the warden would have stopped them. Makes you, I guess, being angels, maybe they kind of slept underneath the radar. Maybe they snuck in. It looked like they went, well, I guess they didn't go through proper channels to get to hell. They kind of found a workaround, but still, it makes you wonder how they managed to do that. Did they even know? Like, how long has the warden known about him being missing? I guess, to be fair, I guess that's the whole point. Because Eugene was there, maybe it compensated for the fact is that the cowboy wasn't there. So when him being missing, they didn't even notice. Because it's like you only went after him now. But it seems like the only reason why they went after him now might have also been a combination of like, they knew he was going, but they didn't know where he was to get him. Which is like your hell, you would think you'd have some kind of tracking system. But the moment Hare called him, it's like, oh, that's when they knew about the cowboy, which I'll get to that in a second. So I wonder which way is it? Is it they knew where he was or they had no idea? I'm kind of leaning towards the fact that they had no idea. Maybe that's why the whole Eugene thing happened, because like he's not supposed to be here. But then again, it's like, well, she is the warden and this is just like one cell block of hell. So maybe, no, because later on in the episode, Eugene and Hitler cross over his particular room because you can hear the machine in his room going off, his hell playing. So it's kind of like, now it seemed like he might be in the same cell block. Granted, it is a cell block, so maybe like they just happen to go over his. She is the warden of the. Maybe I wonder, does she warden just this junction of hell, or does she junction the whole thing? I mean, I'm sure Satan kind of runs everything, which is kind of interesting that when he went back to hell, he was like, "Yo, I want to talk to Satan," and he's like, "Oh yeah, he wants to talk to you too." So. Because another thing about that really quickly too is the fact is that no one else knows about Jesse's soul still being inside the cowboy, except for the cowboy as well as the warden. And she was like, well, tough luck, preacher. Because he's like, he still got my soul. I doubt he ever told Tulip or Cassidy about that. So, but getting back to it, it seems like Hare was the one that called the warden, and that was kind of interesting to me. It's like, in retrospect, it's like, of course he'd have a connection to hell. They have a connection with, heaven and everything. They have this like big time organization. It's like, obviously you would think it would work the other way too. So, which is like, begs the question even more. Why, like, it doesn't seem like the Grail knows about what's in Jesse. I mean, maybe they do, but they haven't referenced it. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it even more, what if that's what this is all about? Because there was a moment where you see Hoover, who's in the front of the truck, that the armored truck that the Cowboys in, he's highlighting stuff in his machine. What if, what if that machine's meant to be built to remove Genesis from Jesse? What if they're trying to make Jesse think like, oh, you're the next Lord or Messiah, and that they're like, no, we're actually just going to take this thing out of you and put it into someone even more worthy? It's like, maybe they're trying to make Jesse think he's worthy when he's actually not, to kind of be the next Messiah and stuff like that. I don't know. That was just immediately where my brain went. But it's like, what else I'm curious what that machine could be for. I mean, granted, maybe it's something, maybe they're trying to build a bunker or some powerful thing for Jesse to use during the apocalypse that is to come, now that the quote-unquote Messiah has been brought out into the light. I'm curious. I don't know. A little quick note, too, kind of before I go further in things, is the whole situation with Dennis and Cassidy, because Cassidy had to hide his doll because he's like, what are you doing in my room, Dennis? And Dennis doesn't really get answered. He's like, get out. And he's like, don't worry, buddy, I'm not going to let him get to you. So, which there's also kind of another layer of things, too, because this whole situation, obviously the way things played out, like Hare and met with Tulip and Cassie. And I love the entire time Cassie is like, oh my God, you basically like, oh my God, you're ugly. And just like, Cassie, what? I can't help it. Just wasn't expecting him to be this. You're so hideous. Almost like, it's like, you're such an asshole, Cassidy. I love you. I love you for it. You're so good. Just like, that's all he would talk about. He's just like, this dude is so ugly. I mean, gosh, look at him. And Tulip's like, shut up. And it basically explains the whole situation to them about like, Jesse's supposed to be the next Messiah. He's meant for bigger and greater things. You guys just didn't realize it. He doesn't want to admit it yet, but what's the point of keeping you guys around? So, and it's like, what do we do from here? So they still don't know about, she still doesn't know about Jenny, aka Featherstone, and that whole thing being a setup. But then you had the camera falling from the wall, which makes me think eventually next week's episode, which, I think it's going to get discovered, and then Jesse's going to find out, wait, all of this shit has been you from the beginning. The whole like rescuing her when he thought she was a singer. Because that's the thing. They've been good to not let Featherstone and Jesse meet. So I'm thinking there might be a moment next week's episode where maybe Tulip is with Jenny and then Jesse, for whatever reason, off without them realizing it, because the camera's down, so he shows up without her realizing it, because Hoover's supposed to be in there watching, but the other camera's going. And they go in there and it's like, wait, what's this? What? Wait. You're with them, and then finding out that everything was a plan to split them up in the first place. So, I don't know, there's just something interesting. My brain's kind of racking around thinking that might be a possibility, but we're just kind of have to wait and see on that front. Like I said, I'm just waiting for this whole Dennis situation to take a turn. So, I mean, it seems like he's still alive and okay because Jesse got him some blood later in the episode. But then, like, him, Tulip, and Cassidy all sit down about this whole situation. They're having laughs and joking about the fact that Cassidy's like, yeah, he saw a unicorn. And so she's like, oh, it's licking up ice cream. He's like, how the hell did you get that from licking ice cream? It's like, no, it was drinking from a pond. It's like, oh yeah, it's thirsty from all the ice cream. What are you talking about? You're trying to ruin my story, and they're laughing and everything. But it's like, so we're going to talk about this, right? And it gets serious. So it's like, I mean, even Cassie's like, how are you going to be the next Messiah? You're not really all holy like that, Jesse. You like to fight people. You like to break people's arm until they make a sound, referencing what he did to Donnie in the first episode. Basically, Jesse's a bad guy and everything. It's like, guns blazing, having fun type of thing. Cassie's like, that's what I'd like to have fun. Like this whole like holy stuff. He's like, that's not my cup of tea. I mean, it seems like, Cassidy probably has his own reasons for that too. I mean, for one, it's probably boring to him, but let's not forget there's still the whole avenue of like, oh yeah, like religious fanatics that want him dead. I'm sure that's a layer to it too, but probably not going to get into that. That's probably not a big like concern for him in this whole situation. But that is the question, like, what would Jesse do now? Like, what does he know about doing this whole Messiah thing? Like, for him, it stems back to like, hey, I want to do right by my dad. And Cause I'm curious, like, what is influencing, like, cause for Jesse, like, this is all influenced by the fact that he wants to make up for the fact that he still blames himself for killing his dad. He's like, my dad was a good person and I killed him because of my prayers and everything. It's I made a promise to my dad be a good person and he didn't do it for the longest time. It's like, no, I have this power. I don't know why I was given it, but I have to do it. Which is another question too. Like the moment they find out that Genesis isn't quite working, which maybe on some level they already did because of what went down last episode. I mean, granted, it worked on Hair, but still, like I said, it's on the fritz. So these are the only times we've seen Jesse kind of use it subsequently since. Is that so? In last week's episode and this moment when he tried to use it on the Cowboys. So we don't know if it's just is it like a lower percentage of it working or whatever the case may be behind that. Cause the whole man dog conversation came up that Jesse points out. It's like, yeah, that's actually guys like, really? I mean, come on. Like, but Jesse's like, we don't know what kind of person would replace God. Like, that's why he feels like he has to be the one to do this because he has this power and everything. And Tulip's like, ultimately, he's like, I know, Jesse, I'm with you. To the end of the earth, to the end of the world, that's our thing. But why do you need us around? And he couldn't really give an answer. And it's like, which is sad because it's like, you should be able to go like, because you're my friends, you're the most important people to me. That should be enough for you, Jesse. But kind of clouded, like he's got misguided at the time, thinking like, okay, this is what I got to do. This is my duty. Ultimately, it also begs the question, is this because you think it's the right thing to do because you think it's your duty? Or is it just because you want the power? You have to think about certain things like that. I feel like a lot of times I give Jesse a lot more shit than he deserves, but it does beg your question because once again, Jesse started all this like, oh, I haven't forgotten about Eugene. Hasn't mentioned Eugene yet. Even when he's in front of the warden, what's he bring up? Oh, his soul. Now wants he to go, oh yeah, there's a boy in hell named Eugene. Didn't once bring him up. So it's like, you see where his priorities are in this whole situation. Like he even tracking down God was for selfish reasons. It's like, yes, as a preacher, it's like, oh yeah, God, need to find him and everything. But even then, it's like, I'm sure he had a even then, I brought it up of like how I think it's this and that. Like, oh, I want to understand why Genesis chose him, put God rightfully back in his throne. But it's like, other than that, I don't know clearly what it is, what Jesse wants. That's ultimately the question. What is it that he wants? And I think not even he knows right now. And I think that's what we're going to be slowly discovering, like where Jesse is at the end of all of this. Who will he be at the end of all of this? I mean, that's a question too, like what is Tulip and Cassie going to do if they decide to kind of split off from Jesse? Because it was a situation where Tulip was like, hey, we can just run off. And then Cassie's like, just us? He's like, no, what about Jesse? And just kind of like, she's like, is there a problem with it just being us? And Cassie's like, no. But he was zooming in on her neck. He could hear like the blood pulsing. So I don't know whether it's a situation of Cassie's always tried to fight his urges. And maybe Jesse being around kind of helped do that. Or maybe this whole situation of being around Dennis kind of amplified that even more. Either way, he has feelings for Tulip, but maybe that's what amplified that even more, like because of how he feels about her, because of the whole Dennis conversation of being like, you like her, right? Just take her. So at the end of it all, we do see him returning to Hair and grabbing his head, almost like saying, like, almost like he's accepting the role. You even had like the Pope saying like, hey, God's missing. Don't worry. Jesus, to a certain extent, has come. I wonder, does he know what the Grail has in plan of like putting Jesse in that position? I mean, because it seemed like even they probably don't know about the whole Humperdoodle situation. So something I didn't even touch on yet, and obviously I'll tack it on here at the end, is the whole going back to it, Eugene situation, him and Hitler. Obviously they go inside and the machine activates. It's so interesting to see, like, obviously inside the hole, it seems like that machine works very differently from the ones in the cells because it modifies itself as a way to kind of mess with you even more. And so Hitler's telling Eugene like, hey, yo, fight it. But it constantly keeps switching up the scenarios just to make him feel bad or kind of sweep him into it. It's like, oh, we can make out. You want to kiss me, don't you? It's like that conversation never happened before, but it's changing up just like it introduced Jesse in the previous one, the last time he was in the hole and everything. So it was just kind of interesting to see like it basically modifies itself to make sure that it keeps you in the scenario. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But basically what it came down to it is that basically he had to confront the fact is that ultimately what happened to Tracy wasn't his fault. He took the blame upon himself because he ultimately blamed himself. That was a situation where he could have, like, I think, once again, we don't know whether it's like if he actually told the truth, whether that mattered. Did no one believe him or what? But basically it made him kind of confront and be like, it's not my fault that you want to kill yourself, because it's like, it made him also point out the fact is that Tracy's not like a good person. She's selfish. She's self-centered. She's not a good person. And the fact of the matter is that she just uses people and stuff like that, which is something we kind of got to see, like, why she had the shotgun in the first place. And the reason why she ultimately killed herself was because, you know, Eugene like kissed her, and it's like, what? You know, because in her mind it's like, ew, I can't live letting people know that a loser, someone disgusting like Eugene kissed me. It's like, wait, what? He was your best friend and everything, and you treat him like trash. So it's like, you know, facing that. Plus there was the troop leader that apparently touched him, dealt with that, and then also confronted his dad, who was like, finish the job. He's like, no, I'm not going to apologize for being your son. You know, I messed up, but I'm a kid. You know, and I'm sorry for that. And his dad was like, come here. He's like, I want you to know I love you. I should have said it before now. I should have always said it, but I love you. And he's like, I love you too, Dad. And his dad leaves. Question is that just part of the machine, or in some shape or form is his dad there? I'm very curious to know where everyone in Anvil landed. It does bring that thought up to you. It makes you wonder, is that going to be something we see in the future where they're just kind of like, oh yeah, like you thought these people, you'd never see them again. They're here in some shape or form, just like we got to see Eugene's dad just like that. But granted, that was probably like a projection and everything, because he had a mouth just like Eugene. So I guess it's supposed to represent like, oh, because of what you did, your dad did did something terrible to himself. The whole conversation came up, all right, because I forgot his mom was in her particular state. I forgot what that was, because I remember him like fixing stuff for her, but I don't remember how. I don't think they ever discussed. Yeah, they never really discussed how she got in that state, did they? The way this conversation paints, it seems like it's supposedly quote unquote Eugene's fault. All the backlash his family had to go through because of what happened to Tracy and everything. So, but ultimately he was able to kind of get free. I'm surprised Jesse didn't come back, but maybe Jesse isn't as much of a hindrance to him as much as everyone else. All those other things were what weighed him down a lot more. Like, he might have some problems with Jesse, but I think ultimately Jesse was kind of one of the few friends, you know, Eugene felt like he could rely on in this whole thing. I don't know. I feel like, I mean, like I said, that whole like altered scenario from before, I would think like, well, that kind of makes sense because you probably hate Jesse to a certain level because the fact is of what he did, sending you in hell and everything. But the fact is he didn't pop up. Makes you go, maybe you don't. Maybe you hate him a little bit, but not to the extent that you're going to be drawn back into the scenario because of it. But nevertheless, it does seem like Hitler and Eugene are making their way out, and I'm very interested obviously see what goes down on that front with everything else too, because next week is in fact the season finale. It's going to be crazy. I'm so interested to see. Like I said, season 1's finale was already good with the way it handled everything with Anvil, obviously finding out about God, just everything transpiring the way it did. And I'm very curious to see where season 2 is going to end off. And I guarantee you it's probably going to be just as crazy, if not more. I'm interested specifically also where Jesse's going to land all this. Is he going to try to be Messiah? Are they going to try and screw him over? Is it going to be like I said, where basically he ends up killing Hare and he ends up taking over the position of all this? What about God? Like, you know, Mad Dog, where is he in all of this? Is Jesse going to meet him? Is everyone going to meet him when it's all said and done? What about Tulip and Cassidy? Will Jesse go like, well, let's go back on the road again or something? I'm curious to see where the story takes us in the season finale. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.